It is Monday, the 22nd of August, and I am Raven Dana, and welcome to Walking Between the Worlds. This is the re recording of class number 4, Listening to the Trees. Hopefully, the gremlin has been subdued and you will be able to hear this recording perfectly. So, welcome and let us begin. Trees appeared over 380 million years ago. Their presence removed carbon dioxide and added oxygen. The climate became hospitable to mammals, especially, eventually leading to humans. Now, once the oxygen levels were around 35% rather than the 21% that we have today, which meant that back in the day, the insects were huge. Dragonflies had as much as a 27-inch wingspan, if you can imagine that for a second. And centipedes were commonly as much as 3 feet long. So with the current level of oxygen, our insects max out, they top out between 5 and 6 inches typically. So that has changed over time. Our relationship with trees, though, the lungs of the earth, has been critical in our own human development. Not only did they provide food and shelter and a place to climb to escape things and to look out into the distance, and eventually the trees also, well, not only did they provide a great amount of food, but eventually they also provided fuel in their wood for campfires and for cooking. Now, that's something that absolutely changed the process of what it is to be human. Because when we began to cook food, and it killed bacteria and parasites and a number of other things, it produced a situation where instead of being able to struggle for food and to have our food contaminated, it made food more digestible. It meant we spent less time hunting and more time developing. Now, the food being cooked is responsible for the size of our large brains. That is the one thing that in our history has shifted us in the direction that we have, now arrived at. So we can thank trees for that. Again, we can thank trees for that. I'm going to read you a relatively long quote from a book because it's fascinating, and I think it kind of sums up or encapsulates all that we've done in the past 4 weeks. This is from The Heartbeat of Trees. The author is Wolben, Wholleben. Now, the book itself, honestly, I recommend the other books more. This one was kind of all over the map, but nevertheless, you're going to like this quote. Tree roots feel. They taste and they make decisions about where they go and how far they travel. They can navigate around obstacles effortlessly. Trees sleep. Birch and oak have been studied, and we know that they relax their branches and they droop as much as 4 inches and then lift them again at first light. Other trees relax in shorter cycles, adding a period of rest during the day. Perhaps they're napping. Now, this action also pumps water through the trees and can be thought of as a type of very slow heartbeat, as water is to the trees what blood is to the human. Many leaves, we believe now, can actually see. There's a special layer of cells on the surface of leaves of trees and many plants that focus light. The special cells are shaped like a lens. And we know that it's not an adaptation that has to do with sugar processing or other typical functions of trees. The adaptation also shows that the leaves can see their surroundings and that they can see in spectrums of light that humans cannot see. He says, accepting recent insights about the self-awareness of plants and trees meets with huge resistance in the conservative scientific community. Many people are terrified of how the worldview would change and how the consequences of their worldview would affect their lives. And therefore, many well-documented discoveries are still ignored and dismissed as fantasy. So we know how this happens, right? We know that things that people don't want to admit are true get swept under the rug, and they pretend that they're not real. But they are. Here's the end of the quote. We know that trees have senses, just like we do, but they have more senses than ours. Plants can see, smell, taste, hear, feel, touch, and their sensory abilities exceed ours. A slight touch of your finger against a leaf on a calm day can quickly cause a wide variety of changes in the chemistry and growth of an ordinary houseplant. Trees have the senses that we lack. They can instantly detect changes in gravity, so that bending a branch produces a rapid growth response. They can see parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that we humans cannot, such as infrared and ultraviolet. So I just think it's noteworthy to take a moment and recognize that what the ancients have always known about trees, that they're beings and they're sentient and they communicate and they know we're there. They hear and they see in their own way, not with the kind of structures that we have, but that doesn't mean that they don't have senses. And to me, this is the perfect place to recognize where magic and science meet, where we can literally dance between the worlds as we recognize that science is beginning to prove what the ancients have known all along. And I love that about the discovery. Even though they're slow learners, even though they don't want to admit it, it's the way things are. The wheels of progress turn very slowly, but they are turning, and the awareness is growing, and that's a wonderful thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about trees in the time period where there was actual tree veneration, tree worship. Of course, there are still cultures that are very aligned and connected to trees today, but back in the early days, trees were sacred, and they were venerated and attended to. The groves the tree groves, especially things like oak trees, were places where not only did rituals take place, they were meeting places. They were places to come together for celebration. There were places to come together when something was happening in a community and needed to be discussed. Rituals, celebrations, weddings, all kinds of things took place in the sacred groves. When the forest worshippers were eventually driven out, ousted by the incoming religion, which was Christianity, unfortunately, what the Christians did was they leveled the groves and they used the wood to build chapels, so that when people came from far to the grove for a celebration, they not only discovered that the grove was gone, but that a chapel stood in its place. And so then they had a choice, basically, to join the new religion, or they met with the local Christians, who basically told them convert or be killed. That was the choice, which is one of the reasons why a lot of the ancient rituals kind of merged and became part of Christianity in other forms, so that their worship could continue in secret ways, right? So many of those practices, of course, have stayed alive. The Celts are known even today for finding what are called clootie wells, probably not the right pronunciation, but it's C-L-O-O-T-I-E, wells, which basically is a well that is very close to a sacred tree. And those trees, on those trees, strips of ribbon and cloth are tied so that they could ripple in the breeze and carry the desire, particularly for healing. Some of those sacred wells are specific for healing. And so the tree would be tied with ribbons and strips of fabric that would then carry the desire and the request to the between worlds. And I don't know if you've ever been to the South, but I have seen versions of those. I have a friend in North Carolina, and I remember once we were out driving and I saw a tree tied with strips of fabric, and now I know what it was. It's a clootie tree. It's fascinating. So there are certainly still places where that is a custom and a way of connecting with the natural world. So oaks, beeches, pines, and alder all release compounds into the air. All trees do. But this little grouping of trees, it's not only a method of communication. When we breathe the air, the substances from those particular trees help us to relax. They stabilize and reduce, if we have high blood pressure, they stabilize our blood pressure, decrease inflammation, reduce pain, and boost immunity. Now, as long ago as 1956, a man by the name of Boris Tokin discovered that the air around groves of pine trees, conifers, he was studying conifers, was nearly germ-free. He showed that these trees produced phytochemicals, and that among them was an antibiotic which protected the conifers from a certain kind of airborne fungus that attacked them. For us, this means that breathing the air in a pine forest helps with asthma, with types of lung disease, with allergies, and with other kinds of respiratory issues. These phytochemicals also trigger human immune system produce more cancer-killing cells. And they also produce cancer-causing proteins. So the benefit of the cancer-killing cells and the anti-cancer proteins lasts for about a week. Other of the responses that we gain from trees last longer, but those last about a week. And the benefit is if you spend just a mere 20 minutes in the woods. So forest bathing, as it's now called, offers a lot of health benefits and even mental health benefits, because many of the phytochemicals that trees produce uplift our mood, balance our brain chemistry, right? Balance our nervous system response, and that brings us a sense of well-being and peace. So it makes just get out in nature. Do it regularly. That's all I can say to you. Make it happen. Not only will you feel physically and mentally better, but you'll also deepen your intuition. You will open up your ability to commune with nature and the trees. You'll begin to feel and sense the communications and the subtle ways that the trees are actually able to observe your presence. Perhaps even you'll begin to sense the way they talk to each other. Perhaps you'll even be able to breathe in those chemicals and enhance their response because you're conscious of it and breathing deeply rather than in your mind wandering around. So go into the forest and just be present and see what happens. Even a study was even done about people who walk, and the discovery was made that those who walk regularly in a forest versus walking in a city, the forest walkers had increased lung capacity and greater elasticity in their arteries. That was true of the forest group, but not the city group. Okay. Today's tree, our final tree of the final class, is one of my personal favorites, the willow. The willow, and I'm going to show you what the symbol looks like for the willow. There it is. There it is. Okay. The willow was loved by the Celts for its flexibility, its flexible branches, its medicine, its mood uplifting effects. There were willow beds planted with herbs. The flexible willow branches were often made into containers, into baskets that held produce and many other household items. In fact, willow baskets were woven for hens because the baskets let the hens, laying hens and brooding hens, let them feel safe and enclosed, but at the same time let air pass through. So it kept down the mites the feather mites that grew on the chicken. So plenty of interesting uses of willows and other trees. It was common for beautiful, elaborate willow baskets to be made and then gifted to others, especially with the first butter of the season or the first fruits of the season. So it, anonymously, particularly, you'd wake up and find this magnificent basket at your front door filled with something lovely. And it's a custom that I really love that idea, and I'm thinking about how to do my own version of that in the here and now. So just throwing that out there, it might be a thing to do. Don't know if I can weave a willow basket, but in any event, I like the thought. One of the things about those baskets also is that they were highly prized, and it was not uncommon for someone to receive a basket and then put it out where it could be viewed, where everyone could see it for a day before they actually ate the goods that were given them, because they were so highly prized. It was common for willow baskets to also be filled with the first breads of the season. So yeah, anything that you think a neighbor might like, you might consider getting a basket and leaving it anonymously for somebody that you appreciate, just as a playing it forward kind of thing. And you can have the trees in mind when you do. Now, willow bark contains a family of compounds that are known throughout indigenous cultures all over the world for pain relief. And many of these compounds are also released into the air and absorbed through the skin and the lungs, which creates not only some pain relief, but a feeling of well-being, a restful feeling, a release of stress kind of feeling. Sitting in a willow grove has been prescribed by indigenous cultures as a remedy for loneliness and for mild depression. So the next time you feel like weeping, you might go tell your troubles to a willow. Trees are fabulous beings of great generosity. Even in death, trees continue to serve their community. When a tree dies, about half the species of the forest that live in any general area will use the dead trees for some kind of shelter. The dead trees also become soil. The nutrients, right before they die, are released to friends and family. Their wisdom is shared with others. And a dying tree will eventually stop communicating, and then when it falls, it becomes food and shelter and soil that continues to nurture and nourish all those that they knew and loved. May we be so gracious. Well, that concludes our class on trees. And I really enjoyed this class. I hope again that the gremlins have stayed away and that you're able to hear this well. Let's have a few breaths though and meditate together, shall we? So relax. Take a few very slow, very deep breaths. And as you breathe, allow yourself to settle down onto the surface beneath you. Rest and allow your eyes to close. Feel the way your breath flows in, lifting you, and flows out, allowing you to drift gently down and relax. Breathing in, you rise up, and breathing out, you drift slowly down. You relax your belly, release your jaw, and your shoulders drop down away from your ears. The more you relax, the more your mind becomes still. And in that quiet place, that space between thoughts, images begin to rise. And you find yourself walking through a forest. Not just any forest, but an ancient forest. The trees are enormous. The foliage is thick. The birds are singing, and the air is sweet and clear. You're walking a well-worn path through the woods. And as you navigate across a small stream, you come upon a clearing. And in the center of that clearing is a grove of oaks. And you recognize that there are people standing among the trees. And you walk across the area filled with grasses and wildflowers, approaching the grove. The wind picks up. You can hear the trees whispering in the wind, as if announcing your arrival. And as you get closer, you notice that the people seem to be from different times and different places. There are 2 or 3 people standing in little clusters, and each group seems to be from a different place and time. You notice their dress. You notice how they're speaking. And there are 2 people standing not far from you as you enter the grove, and they wave you over. We're from your century, they say. And a woman standing in the center of the grove, wearing a long robe, raises her voice and begins to sing. And all of you feel that singing in your blood and understand the song. You slowly form a circle, listening to the sound of her voice as she thanks the trees, welcomes the trees, venerates the trees. And you suddenly feel this sensation as if you're growing roots, your energy moving down and down in the ground, mingling with the lichen and the roots of trees, joining them. Acknowledging their sentience, communicating your own gratefulness for all the trees throughout history and for the trees in your current life. And the song goes on, lilting and beautiful, soothing and calming. You can feel the trees listening. And you can also feel your own energy now begin to rise. Now that you're down deep, rooted in the earth, your energy rises above you, joining and mingling with the energies of all the others there. Mingling high in the canopy of the oak trees. And you find yourself in the most unique way able to listen to the trees. You breathe in, understanding the communication of their chemical system. You breathe in knowing that the oxygen you breathe is courtesy of these magnificent beings. And slowly, the song begins to slow and stop. And there's silence. And in that few moments of silence, all the sounds of nature returns. The birds singing, the breeze blowing through the trees, and you find yourself slowly looking around the circle. Everyone acknowledging the presence, the magnificence of what it is to be fully awake and human and able to commune with nature in the way that the ancient ones always were able. And the woman speaks, "Bring this knowing back with you to the waking world," she says. "Share this knowing and live it. Stand under the trees and listen." And with that, you close your eyes and begin to breathe, smelling the sweet air, calling yourself back, one breath at a time, returning to the room in which you rest, returning to your body, returning to the moment, and bringing back that connection. You breathe your way all the way back, refreshed, relaxed, and you allow your eyes to open. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me and for being in this conversation, this class about trees. May we find each other out in the forest when we least expect it, breathing the air, thinking of trees, and connecting with each other as well. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again. Bye now. And may the trees be with you.